Former FBI Director James Comey may be indicted soon. Sources tell CNN that President Trump's Justice Department is close to deciding on whether to charge Comey with lying to Congress. The testimony in question happened on September 30th, 2020, when Comey appeared before Congress to answer questions about his handling of the investigation into Russia's meddling in the 2016 election. You see him there. This was during COVID, of course, so he's doing it from home or from work. Under the law, prosecutors only have 5 years to the day to bring such a charge. If a grand jury does approve the case in the coming days, this would be one of the highest profile indictments in President Trump's second term. And this comes after President Trump made blatant public directives to his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to prosecute his political enemies, including Comey. And of course, he fired a U.S. attorney for not bringing criminal charges against his opponents. CNN crime and justice correspondent Caitlin Polance and CNN senior justice correspondent Evan Perez join us now. So, Caitlin, what are prosecutors doing right now before they run out of time?
Well, to the best of our knowledge, they are getting ready to present a case to a federal grand jury in the Eastern District of Virginia. So that's part of the federal court system in Virginia, where a lot has gone down in the past few days. What we do know about this is the contours of what has to happen between now and Tuesday. So we know that the prosecutors are looking at the possibility that James Comey lied to Congress. That's according to sources that Evan and I have. And we also know that that possible perjury charge, there's a deadline to bring it, because in the federal court system, you have 5 years to bring a charge. And that testimony Comey gave, it was on September 30th of 2020. September 30th, that's next Tuesday, and grand juries don't sit every day. What day will the Justice Department be able to go before a secret grand jury in one of the federal courthouses in the Eastern District of Virginia? Today's a possibility. Tomorrow, Monday, not a lot of time, and they will have to convince those grand jurors, between 14 and 22 people, to vote yes to indict Comey. We know that there have also been several different investigations around Jim Comey over the years after he was the FBI director. A lot of scrutiny there. He's the person that Donald Trump was posting on social media about over the weekend, saying no talk, all action, no talk, justice must be served, mentioning what about Comey. This situation, we don't know the exact details of what this indictment will say, but we are waiting to see exactly what emerges out of the federal.
So we don't know specifically what he's accused of lying about.
That's right.
Oh, that's interesting. And Evan, the Eastern District of Virginia, the U.S. Attorney's Office there, we've been talking about that.
Yeah, we were talking about this just last
Friday.
week. Yeah.
Remind everybody.
Well, Eric Siebert was the U.S. Attorney there. He was he was the acting U.S. Attorney, and he was picked by Donald Trump to run that office. And we know that one of the things that he's been investigating in not only Comey, but also the investigation into alleged mortgage fraud by Letitia James, who is the New York Attorney General who brought the civil fraud cases against Trump and his company. Siebert and his prosecutors there were balking at that case in particular, which led Trump over the weekend to essentially lash out at Pam Bondi and at Siebert. He fired him on Friday, and he installed on Monday Lindsay Halligan, who is one of his former attorneys. And so she took office on Monday, Jake, and she has now been seen in the last few days at the Justice Department. Surely this is among the cases that she's looking at to see when they could bring it. And as Caitlin points out, we don't know when they'll do it, but they certainly have to make a decision between now and Tuesday.
And Siebert, conservative, had been bringing a bunch of immigration
pro-Trump
cases,
person,
worked his way up through the office of the U.S. Attorney's Office.
And his one sin, according to Trump, is that he had the support of the 2 Virginia Democratic senators, which is how it works.
We know, but we also know his real sin was he didn't bring charges, right?
Right, exactly.
And his replacement, a former insurance lawyer,
right,
and
was present when Mar-a-Lago was searched.
But very loyal.
Very loyal, right. And the assumption is that she will likely do the things that Trump wants. I mean, that's why he wants her there.
Yeah. All right, Caitlin and Evan, thanks so much. Joining us now, CNN political analyst and New York Times' Pulitzer Prize-winning White House correspondent Maggie Haberman. Maggie, what are your sources telling you about this, about these potential charges against FBI Director Comey?
Look, Jake, this is something that, President Trump has made no secret. What I've been hearing from people privately is what he's been saying publicly is that he wants to see James Comey prosecuted. There has been an effort to try to make that happen. There was resistance, I believe, and that's in some of the reporting that we're seeing now about going through with this, because prosecutors just didn't believe that there was going to be enough to make a case on, or so we have been told. Now, to go ahead in spite of that is a risk, because it's not really clear that you're not guaranteed an indictment just because you go before a grand jury. And so we will see what this looks like if, in fact, they go ahead. Now, you know, as CNN's reporting shows, they are debating what to do. But again, Lindsay Halligan is President Trump's hand-picked person. He wanted her there. He did not want Eric Siebert in that role anymore. He was not just Trump's pick. He was his person. It was his office who went ahead and backed him. And yes, Democratic senators were fine with him, but that got used against him by some of his Siebert's opponents and critics within the administration. So this is something, again, we know that President Trump has been looking for this for many, many, many years, and I expect him to try to push this ahead as far as possible, but we'll see.
And just to be clear here, President Trump wanting a prosecution of James Comey, does it matter what the charge is, or he just wants his political enemies charged with something?
Well, I think to prosecutors it matters. I mean, I don't think that the president is necessarily the closest observer of the criminal law, but I do think that for prosecutors, they realize there has to be a case that they can argue. We have seen other prosecutions in the Trump era, such as some that emerged from the Durham report, that did not end up in convictions, even though they ended up with indictments. So if there is a decision to move ahead with an indictment here with Comey, then it would go to trial, and then we would sit, presumably, and then we would see what that looks like. There's also a world where there isn't necessarily an indictment returned. And so this is, again, and this is all, Jake, playing out so publicly in the press. This is also typically not what prosecutors want.
Some might argue, of course, a lot of Hillary Clinton supporters would argue that James Comey, in his announcement just before the election, that he was reopening the investigation into her. A lot of people think that including Hillary Clinton, think that James Comey is the reason Donald Trump won in 2016 because of that announcement. He did reintroduce those charges against Clinton just days before the election, the investigation.
Well, he reintroduced the fact that there was an issue about on a laptop related to emails that she had been sending, and it is certainly true that her folks believe that he is the reason that she lost. I think that her critics argue that there are a number of reasons that the election went the way it did, but regardless, yes, I mean, this is something that everybody can grab onto something and say they were harmed. President Trump has pointed to James Comey over and over and over again, in part because his own decision to fire James Comey led to all kinds of other things after the fact.
If Comey does get indicted, would a charge alone satisfy Trump's crusade to go after his political opponents, or does he still want, as he noted in his public social media post to Pam Bondi over the weekend, he wants charges against Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, against Senator Adam Schiff of California. It does seem as though his appetite when it comes to these things is insatiable.
Yeah, look, President Trump has typically, over the long course of his life, his time in business, his time as a celebrity, his time in the White House, his time as a candidate, has taken things as far as he can go. And I doubt that it would be, well, I got this and now I'm going to move on. As you just said, you just listed a number of other targets, one of whom was being investigated, has been being investigated by the Eastern District of Virginia, Letitia James. And so this, I don't expect this to then be, now President Trump is going to move on. He was quite clear. He's not saying any of this again. There's not really an inside voice on this, Jake. I mean, the president was really clear about it over the weekend in a social media post that possibly was intended as a private message to Pam Bondi initially, but but it was public, and he issued it again, and then he issued a support of her, but he also told reporters that she needs to act fast, and he tethered it specifically to the indictments that he had faced. So there you go.
All right, Maggie Haberman, always great to have you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jake.